Alright, what's up, listeners? Welcome to Predator vs. Movies. So, I'm Alex.
That's
That's
how
not even what
Priscilla
he
talks
says.
in the movie.
Yeah.
No, that's how Priscilla talks in the movie. I'm Aidan.
No Peter or Priscilla.
No,
Neither of them
Peter
are
or
here.
Scylla.
And
Yeah.
this is a podcast where we discuss
Well,
and
she's
review the latest.
keeping the home fires burning. That's what she's
She
doing.
is, but
Yeah.
they're burning real low. So it's getting real low. And we're gonna review the latest movie releases. We'll start off with a non-spoiler review before diving into a deep discussion of the film, and then we'll ask the most important question: would this movie be better if Colonel Tom Parker was in it?
Right.
Just
Who
kidding.
is the Predator?
Who is the Predator? I'm just kidding. This is my regular voice, and this is we're gonna ask if the movie would be better if the alien from Predator was in it. This week we're gonna be reviewing Priscilla, the latest movie by Sofia Coppola. But before we do so, we have some news and a new segment in the news category.
Yeah, new to me too. I'm learning about this live.
And I'm figuring it out on the fly. So this is called Quick Bites, or it is for now. Sound drop for me, Aidan? Yes! That's what I was looking for. So this is a segment where I just give you a headline and you react in one word.
We already do that.
I know, but I should actually next time, because you can see them, so you might have read them.
Yeah.
But next time I'll hide them from you, and so it'll be
okay.
Okay.
Okay, I like this.
So the first quick bite for you from Hollywood Reporter: 2 sequels for the movie Fall are in the works.
No. Why? How?
That's 2 words.
How?
That's 2
How
words.
is the biggest question?
A selection of one-word answers. Thank you. I guess she just climbs the tower.
They keep doing it.
It didn't work.
She's like, this time I gotta get up there.
I'll figure it out. This time it won't fall. Next quick bite for you. Variety says that Joe Biden got scared of AI after watching Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Good.
Yeah, good.
And that concludes our quick bite segment. It was quick. Our next bit of news, this is a full-fledged piece of news.
I'm back in it.
The headline I have crafted here is that Marvel is fucked.
Yeah.
I forget who did this piece, and maybe I'll look it up. But basically, there was like an article that said there was kind of like some insider information about the panic going on at Marvel Studios, and it listed all sorts of issues they've had. And there was okay. So here's what happened. There was a meeting, as they usually do. They've been doing this for years, but this meeting was different because it was a panic-filled meeting. And in it, they were trying to figure out how to right the ship, essentially. And some of the ideas that came out of this included reconsidering Kang as the central villain of the multiverse saga, and pivoting to a new character such as Doctor Doom, who is yet to be introduced in the MCU, or bringing the original Avengers back and reviving Iron Man and Black Widow to do a new Avenger. I don't know what that would be, but those are some of the things they were considering to pivot to. But there are some other issues, such as Blade has been in continual development hell, constant rewrites of the script. At one point, there was a version where Blade, played by Academy Award winner Mahershala Ali, was the 4th lead of his eponymous film, which is just insane to me. Luckily, is now being written by the writer of Logan, so hopefully that will be fixed. But anyways, what do you think about all this, Aidan?
They need God. That's my take. When I read the headline about Iron Man and Black Widow being resurrected, my first thought was literally just that the higher powers have left us. We're no longer like this is bad. We need divine intervention here.
Yeah.
This is bad. This is bad stuff. I mean, I will say about the Blade thing, I also saw a tweet from someone who I mean, it's Twitter and like maybe it's not true, but it seemed like they were a real writer, and they said like they never saw a version of the script. They worked on Blade scripts and they never saw a version of the script that he was the 4th lead of, And so like that might be exaggerated a little bit, or maybe the guy I saw is not being accurate. I don't whatever. But like I think regardless, I do it's also kind of an auspicious day because I do think the MCU is dying, and I think that's good. I think they're done.
So what you're saying is we should celebrate, in fact.
We should celebrate. I do think we should celebrate. Are you pulling your props?
Stall.
Yeah. So I just think that, like, considering...
Okay, I'm ready. You didn't need to stall that long. I'll put that away later. Yeah. So I did look up... it is, in fact, by Variety, who did that report. Just want to give credit where it's due. Yeah. But also, there was a little leak, a tidbit from Twitter user... So, apologies from Twitter user My Time to Shine Hello, who has had some things right in the past. Dubious. I'm not sure if I fully trust them, but they said that RDJ has reportedly already agreed to return as Tony Stark. So if that is to believed, it may already be underway.
That sucks, man. That actually sucks for RDJ too, because it's like you got back into being in real movies, man. Right? Stay there.
Yeah.
Stay there. Stay where you are. I mean,
he will. There's a chance that he wins Best Supporting Actor
at
the Academy Awards for his work in Oppenheimer.
He deserves a nomination for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, so it's fucked that they have to do that. And frankly, like, I don't even. What would you even do with the returning Avengers? Yeah. Like,
his arc is done. Like, what would he? Yeah. Like, what would he?
There's even no if you room resurrect him to go. And I understand bringing back the most charismatic lead, like the person you were hanging the franchise on, like that makes sense. But like the original Avengers were like fine, you know? Like I don't think that was the successful X factor. Like I don't think we need to bring back Hawkeye. I don't think people are gonna be like, oh my god, Hawkeye is back. Oh my god,
and honestly, is back. You know, like even Black Widow, like people don't like people like Iron Man, people grew to like Thor. Like I don't know, like what else are we talking about here?
Like I don't think superheroes are going to be around much longer, just based on the market and like what's been happening. But what I will say is that there is a way forward, and it is just like kind of like you need to stop. Yeah, I think you just need to stop for a second, like think.
Yeah.
I think honestly, I don't know if there's a way forward for the MCU as it is. Like, no. I honestly think maybe the best thing to do is just hard reboot as soon as possible and focus on crafting coherent, legible stories by people who have like invested interest. Like trying to recreate the magic of Guardians would be a good idea. So yeah, that would be my advice to Marvel Studios.
I agree, and I would say like, you know, just make a good movie, and I would say, and make movies too. Like stop with all this like stop with trying to branch it and trying to keep everyone in one place with every show. Like, I would say if Marvel wants to do well, impose a strict one movie every 3 years rule. And like take time to make a few movies, and if they're good, they'll do well. If you just market them well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the Star Wars brand, how that got like muddled down because we were getting one every year, so the anticipation wore down. They also just weren't very good a lot of the time, or you know they were fine, but they weren't what we were hoping for. And I'd say there was a common complaint early on. I just wanted to bring this up. That an issue with the multiverse saga post Endgame was that it felt directionless, and that people were like, "What's the Thanos? What's going on?" And initially, I responded to that, like kind of being like defending and being like, "No, like think back to Phase 1. Like there was no overarching plan. It was here's Iron Man, here's Thor, right? Like we're just kind of introducing characters, and those are self-contained stories." But thinking back on it, I actually do think that it's a genie kind of situation. You've turned it into a serialized cross-movie continuity experiment.
A very expensive TV show.
Yes, so you can't put
Yeah.
the genie back in the bottle and go back to things that have no meaning, right?
Right.
Everyone's going to be wondering, what is the next Thanos? Who's Kang, right? And I just think, I guess also, like, if you think about Phase 1 in a different way, it did have a clear direction. It was setting up the Avengers.
Yeah.
So you had, every movie was, this is an Avenger, this is an Avenger, this is an Avenger. Here are the Avengers. Whereas this multiverse saga, it's phase 4 and phase I think we're in 5 now.
Yeah.
It's like, where are we going with this? We are missing an Avengers movie, which is probably another really big issue. Why have we not had an intermediary? They should have done Avengers
they need to come
5
together
before Kang.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a huge issue, is that we just have no idea who the Avengers are. And frankly, I don't think Marvel knows who the Avengers are.
Even if they didn't do an Avengers movie where they all meet up, some of them have to meet. Like, they just have to... We have to have an idea that these people, like, know... Like, there is a connection. We have to have an idea that connections are forming. And I guess they're kind of doing that with the Marvels coming out next. But unfortunately, I won't be watching that. So, that is the thing with that.
Yeah. I can think of one movie where they did that, and that was Spider-Man, where they had the connection with Doctor Strange.
True. Yeah.
Other than that, I can't think of many. And I think another issue, they just introduced way too many new characters instead of focusing on the ones we know.
Yeah.
And that caused problems. The middling
And they didn't
TV
care
shows,
enough about them, yeah. They didn't put enough
Right,
care
like-
into any of them, so all of those characters are like, what, like Moon Knight is gonna run it, like, coming up? Like, who do we have? Like,
Yeah.
I don't care about any of these people because all of their properties suck ass. Like-
Yeah. Yeah, the TV shows are their own separate issue. Just like the list of things you have to watch to keep up is building.
Yes.
And as those items of content, those checklist items grow, each one is getting worse and worse and less enjoyable to watch, like by itself as its own entity. And so people very quickly were like, I can't invest that much time into this because it's not good. I'm not investing time into something. Like, you're saying, like, it'll all add up to something, but I'm not seeing it in the here and now. And so this is just not worth my time. Speaking of which, we got a trailer for Echo, the new Marvel series.
Yeah.
Marvel's Andor, some people are saying.
We're in the trailer
Thank you,
park
we're in the
now,
trailer
for
park.
those who know.
Did you hear people say that? This is going to be Marvel's Andor?
I did not hear that, but I
Insanity.
disagree.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people like getting very hyped about this trailer, and it's like,
No,
no,
I know.
no.
Like I said some things, but I'll
Yeah.
like to our group chat, and so I'll kind of explain that.
It doesn't look bad, but it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As for the Marvel's Andor thing, I definitely said that about Secret Invasion. That was what my hope for what it was. I didn't end up watching it, but I heard terrible things.
Yeah.
So I think the difference though is, like, that show had potential to be a Marvel's Andor. The issue is that Marvel is not in the business of creating Andors. It is in the business of churning out as much schlock as possible. Anyways, there was a trailer. So this is the Echo spin-off series from the Hawkeye television. Sorry, from the Hawkeye television series, and a spin-off of Netflix's Daredevil.
Yes.
Sure.
In a way, yeah.
Anyways, so this is gonna follow the character of Echo, an indigenous Marvel character who has like a relationship to Kingpin. I think he was like kind of like a surrogate father to her.
Yeah, she was kind of like working sort of with him in the
Yeah.
Hawkeye show. I watched the Hawkeye show, and legitimately that's one of my favorite Marvel shows.
Really?
So yeah.
Wouldn't
So
have guessed.
I can fill in some gaps. That one was one of my favorite ones that I did watch. That was easily a top tier one for me.
Okay, just sidebar. Like, what are your favorites?
I liked. Well, we rated them at one point on the pod.
I know, but I don't remember.
I liked Hawkeye a lot. I liked She-Hulk
Why?
from what I saw more than a lot of the other ones. And then I liked WandaVision, and I think I literally don't like any of them at all other than that.
I think my esteem of She-Hulk has diminished with time. That was in my like defending era, like,
Sure.
no guys, it's good. But then, like, thinking back on it, I was like, man, that was so forced. I didn't I didn't love it.
It's not a great show, but I'm just thinking about like shows that I did like just on some level there were things I liked.
Yeah.
Like I just like I have some respect for this show. So there was that one, and then a Hawkeye, like just something about it. I was like, this is actually kind of fun.
You like the like Thanos was right.
Show. I like that Thanos is right. I like that he's in the. I like that he's peeing in the urinal.
I like that episode with the Thanos was right and the musical. Genuinely, I thought was really fun and like a good idea to expand the world.
I'm not saying it's a great show, but don't get me wrong here. I would never ride or die for Hawkeye. I just that was one of my preferred MCU shows out of all of them.
Yeah. Anyway, so Echo's from that. So she has well, let's just talk about the trailer as it is first of all. My thoughts are that there are select moments that there. Well, I would say like 70 to 80% of the trailer looks exactly like every other Marvel Disney Plus series, like the exact same kind of like quality.
Except they've turned the saturation down.
Well, I'll just get to that. So like the fight scenes look the exact same. Like the fight scenes have no distinction from any other fight scene I've seen in the cornucopia of Disney Plus stuff. A bad cornucopia. But maybe 20 to 10% of the trailer, maybe even 5%, I don't know. But like some amount was actually like, I was like, oh. Like there was a couple shots where I was genuinely like, oh, that's a real shot. Someone actually did a shot there.
Sure.
One that really stuck in my mind is the dead body upside down with like the blood dripping from his eyes. That's like a thing that looks actually cool. Some of the things, I think there's also like another percentage. I'm not going to try and guess how much, but that is like very clearly trying to achieve cool and is failing. And I was also, like, I see what you're attempting here. Like there was a black and white moment, and I was like, I know what you're going for. Like you think this is cool, but it's bad. Like you didn't do a good job composing.
It looks to me like it's trying to be what the Netflix Daredevil show was. Yeah. Like a little bit stylistically. And again, I know I've asked this like many times on the pod. Why not just do that with Daredevil? Just make that show. If you want to make that show, then make that show. You can. Yeah.
They're trying to just chase the success of something they didn't do.
Yeah.
And instead of just doing more of it, they're like, but what if different? I don't know. There's some other issues with this. So the director of Echo, Sydney Freeland, there was a quote from her that said, her power in the comic books is that she can copy anything, any movement, any whatever. This is true. She has abilities similar to Taskmaster, who I'm just remembering we did see in the MCU.
That was Black Widow.
Widow. I forgot about that movie. The quote continues to say, "It's kind of lame. I will say that is not her power."
That's fire.
Why are we?
I respect that.
Why are we hiring people that don't respect, like? Okay,
no,
I don't want to get into too much. Like,
I agree with this. I don't care. I do not care. I will take someone who looked at the project and said, if they look at the source material and they're like, oh, I don't like that, we're gonna do this instead, and they like the thing they come up with, good, do that. I don't care. I don't give a fuck about faithfulness to the comics. That doesn't mean anything.
Okay,
to me.
I could be swayed. I think there's two different like distinctions for this, I guess. So
sure.
Echo, I think, is a case where I could see the case being made for that. So like if she's just like a very skilled combatant, she doesn't need superpowers. So if what she actually means by this, she says, I will say that is not her power, which kind of infers that she does have powers anyways. But if her power was not that, like if she was just good at her job, I'm okay with changing it that way, because that's pretty similar to be like, she can copy anything, to just be like, she's really good. I'll be like, yeah, sure. But my issue goes into like when it's a Ms. Marvel situation, when it's like the powers were chosen for a very specific reason. No, that's one I do care about, because the stretchy thing is like, that's like her thing.
I don't like the powers they chose. Yeah, like the powers they chose suck for sure. But if my point is that like I don't care that they didn't do the comic thing. I just care that what they did do sucked.
That one's a case where the reason why her powers why they were the way they were in the comics made sense to the character and to the themes. It was like she's like a Mr. Fantastic type character. She can grow in any body part. And the reason why that's cool is it's like puberty. It's like feeling like you're out of control of your body and kind of feeling like her powers always kind of look weird. Like she doesn't have like a really like maybe she'll have like a really big eyeball or something. Like it's supposed to be kind of gross. And so there's something to that. And if you switch it to light-based powers, it's like you lose that element of it. And the only reason they did that was for the Marvels. It's nothing. Yeah. It's Green Lantern. Yeah. And the only reason was for the greater MCU continuity and for a team-up kind of situation. But anyways, this is also the only the first TVMA series Marvel has done. So that means it's like R but TV. That's cool, but I don't know. I'd say overall. But I'm not watching it,
so I don't care.
They're releasing all the episodes at once, which is not a good sign. Yeah. And I've learned from Marvel trailer. They've conditioned me in a way that I'll watch a trailer that looks good and I'll be like, that's gonna be really bad. Like, you're trying to fool me right now. I can tell that despite like you made a good trailer, this will not be a good product.
I think that's enough MCU talk though. This is like an old episode. This is so nostalgic. We're talking about Marvel for like 20 minutes to start off the episode about like an art house film. This is our bread and butter.
Anyways, there were two other trailers we could zoom through. There was a trailer for Fall Guy by David Leitch, who did Deadpool 2, who also did Atomic Blonde and some other stuff.
He did Free Guy, didn't he?
No, that's the guy, Sean Levy, who's doing Deadpool 3. But Fall Guy is the one where it's a stunt guy played by Ryan Gosling, my favorite, who wants to woo... Oh, he also did Bullet Train. That's the other thing.
Yes, he did do Bullet Train.
Bad movie. He's trying to woo the director of the film he's working on. They were old flames or something, and then she's played by Emily Blunt, and he finds himself in a criminal conspiracy or something, and he has to use his stunt guy abilities, his powers, which are kind of lame, to save the day or whatever. I watched this trailer and I was like, man, this is actually gonna fire. I'll watch this. I'll be there.
No, I will not be there. I will not be there. I watched the trailer and I watched the first part and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a fun premise. It's gonna be kind of like an action-y rom-com thing where like he's the stuntman and they have a thing in the past. They have to keep a secret, and it's like, but then the star of the movie gets kidnapped and then he has to go on an adventure. And what are you talking about? You have a movie there already.
Well, he has to go on an adventure. The star of the movie is kidnapped, and he has to go on an adventure.
He doesn't have to do that.
He's to fight crime.
Just stay where you are. Just stay where you are,
man. He has to fight crime.
No, he doesn't.
That's all David Leitch knows how to do. He has to fight crime.
No, he doesn't do
that. Anyways, I will say that, like, Ryan Gosling looks really funny in this. I love Ryan Gosling doing comedic roles, so that's kind of...
I do, too.
...my main selling point. I don't care that Aaron Taylor Johnson... the star of the fictional film in the film is missing. That part I'm gonna be like, yeah, whatever, sure. He's missing. But yeah, I'm there for Ryan Gosling. He's very charming in the trailer. Anyways, there's another trailer.
I won't be there, but I will be there for this. I will be there for this.
For this one. This is the trailer for what the fuck is it called? Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
They have the weirdest naming schemes for these movies.
Well, it was Planet of the Apes.
It was Rise, Dawn, War. Dusk. It was like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, and now it's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
When's the before sunset of the Planet of the Apes?
Before sunset? Well, before sunset's the second one, no?
Because it was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, so before sunset of the Planet of the Apes.
Yes. Yeah.
I joke. Anyways, I really loved the 2-second movies, the Matt Reeves ones, Dawn and War. Yeah, I think those ones are good. Those ones are really good. So if they're keeping up that would be cool.
They're also monkeys. And I said this to Alex. I also said this to Alex before. I hope that there's some gibbon representation because it is called Planet of the Apes, and I don't see many lesser apes. It seems like there's a high focus on gray apes. So I hope to see some Hylopetids Gibbons and Samangs in here. That's my take.
Samangs, yeah.
Yeah.
What about the bonobo? Were there any in there? Did you see any bonobos?
I couldn't tell. I'm not. I don't have enough attuned eye to distinguish a bonobo from a chimp, to be honest with you. They are the same genus.
Oh, I see. Anyway, so this is directed by Wes Ball, so it's no longer directed by Matt Reeves. Wes Ball did every Maze Runner movie and nothing else.
Okay.
So good luck. Good
I'll
luck,
still be
Wes
there.
Ball.
I'll still be there.
You'll still be there?
Yeah.
Do you think it'll ever like circle back to
I
the
don't mind the
original?
Maze Runner movie.
Is that
I
where
haven't
they're
seen
going?
it since I was a teenager, but I don't know. Oh,
I didn't watch
like
it.
like if that's you think like the thing on the beach where he's like, why, or whatever.
Holy shit, that's the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
That bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that movie, but I think I feel like we're looping back because this feels a lot more like that. I think that was the
Sure.
idea. Was the first trilogy was like.
Well,
a
he thought he
prequel
went to a
trilogy,
different
how we got
planet.
there.
Yeah.
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 Do you think they'll ever
saw a
do
movie.
Evola? Do you think they'll ever do Dr. Zaius? The Simpsons. Have you seen that? The Simpsons clip? Okay, I'll describe this to you really quick. So there's a Simpsons gag where they go to Planet of the Apes the musical, and it just shows a very quick scene from that, and it's a song for Dr. Zaius, who I can only assume is like a very minor character, and that's the joke. Is like there's a song for Dr. Zaius, and the human character's like, "What's wrong with me?" And I don't know, the guy says something like da na 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 na, and it's rhyming, and then the chorus is Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius, da, da. And there's a bit where he's like standing still, and there's 3 apes bowing their hand and like walking in a circle around him. And then what's the other bit? Oh, there's a part where like one ape just starts like b-boy dancing and does like a whole thing. It's really funny. Go look that up. Anyways, we did a movie.
We did watch a movie.
This will be a really long episode. We did a movie. It's called Priscilla.
It's called Priscilla. Yeah, so this time I got it locked and loaded. This was written and directed by Sofia Coppola. It was based on the book Elvis and Me, written by Priscilla Presley herself, as well as Sandra Harmon. This is starring Kaylee Spaney, Jacob Elordi, and other people as well, but those are the main characters. Their running time is 113 minutes. It was released. The initial release was in Venice on September 4th, 2023. The wide release is October 27th, 2023 in the United States. The budget was $20 million, and so far the box office is $5.3 million.
Nice.
That's what we're rocking with.
As always, we have a game. It's called the Predacritic Game.
Yes.
The explanation for that is as follows. There is a website called Metacritic where critics' scores of a movie are averaged out of 100. We are going to guess where Priscilla ranks in that metric. I have spun the random wheel generator, and Aidan will in fact be guessing first.
Fuck. I'm not even gonna think about too hard. 80.
80.
80.
I'm not going to think too hard, and I'm going to guess lower than that. It's 79,
okay.
And that is where I will land.
Okay.
And now I will have to look it up, and you'll have to give me a moment. Priscilla.
Priscilla. It's a hard name to spell. Anytime there's an S before a C, it breaks my mind. That's not supposed to happen.
And it looks like, in a shocking turn of events, I in fact win this round.
Nice.
Priscilla got 77, and I finally get out of my losing streak. I've been summarizing a lot of movies. So as the winner, I do get to give my non-spoiler reaction first. This was a movie I was looking forward to. I liked the look of the trailer. I thought the cinematography was really striking, and I liked the idea of a counter-narrative to the awful movie Elvis. And just kind of like, even then, I was like, he dated a 14-year-old, right? Like, that's the person he married. She was 14, and I had to look this up. He was 24. It was very vague. I did not know how old he was at any point. But he was 24, and she was 14.
And we'll talk about that.
We will talk about that.
Yeah.
You have thoughts? You have thoughts on that, yes. On if that was good or bad, probably? Anyways, so when watching Elvis by Baz Luhrmann, it was very convenient how they glossed over that bit of information. And so I was like, oh, good, they're telling like the important story about that.
Sure.
I liked maybe the first half hour or so. Like I really liked the beginning, or I thought it was pretty good at least. Like I don't think I was ever at a point of like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I thought it was like serviceable and like a good interpretation, like kind of like classic Sofia Coppola. Right around when it got to Act 2, it did kind of devolve into a relentless repetition of the same beat, is how I felt. I think it just kind of gets bogged down in showing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's a, with slight variation, obviously, but I just felt it hits kind of a standstill for a while. It does at some point pick up again later on. And when it picks up again, I was like, it got good again. Oh, things are changing and it's good now. And there's some more like new beats that are happening. And so yeah, that was kind of like my biggest issue is I just found a good stretch of it quite boring and I got really tired, in fact. And then kind of related to that, but a more wider issue I had is that I found it all to be quite one note. I found that Priscilla is quite one note, Elvis is quite one note as characters, not the actors' performances at all. And I felt that Sofia Coppola was coming to this movie with one very clear and correct idea about what she wanted to say. I agree with what she's trying to say, but I found it to be just kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again with very little nuance, and that was kind of what I was hoping for, was a nuanced portrayal, and I found it almost as lacking in nuance as the Elvis movie, just in the extreme opposite direction. So I think I'll more or less leave it at that. The cinematography and lighting were still as good as I had imagined from the trailers, but yeah, I found the script to be wanting.
Rating and Rex.
Fuck, I forgot. I don't usually go first.
You don't go first.
I was thinking about my rating. It's gonna have to land between a 3.5 and a 3. It's feeling more like 3 territory, just because I didn't enjoy it. Like leaving the theater, I was like, it was a movie I saw. I think it was like filmed quite well. But I had a lot of problems with the script specifically. Would I recommend people go see this? Sure. It's not a movie that I hated so much that I would say no. So sure. I would say maybe consider checking it out and support. But yeah, that's how I felt. How about you?
Well, this is gonna be fun then. I like this movie a lot. I really enjoy this movie. The funny thing is though, I feel like I actually recognize some of the same things that you've said. But I think they're very intentional, and I think they have to do with the perspective of the movie.
Some of that.
And I think that they have to do with, I think this is a very fantastical movie. And by that I don't mean it's like Lord of the Rings, but I mean it's like it has this filter of fantasy that is being portrayed through while also being this kind of grounded perspective. I think it's very, very interesting. So things I like a lot about this movie is, again, how it's playing with perspective, like I was talking about. The details that are omitted, this is a point that you've written down. I was going to write down the same thing. What is omitted? What details are vague? I think it makes a very good point of recreating childhood in a sense. Like the way in which we receive information in this movie feels like we are part of a child's world. And I think that's very well made. I don't quite agree that the characters are one note. I actually think there's a lot going on. I think that they're ambiguous, especially Elvis, I think is ambiguous in some ways. But I think that that's very intentional, actually. And I think I still think there's a lot to think about there. And then I also think that there's a lot going on with Priscilla as well, actually. So I really, really like this movie. I'm always a fan of movies that have really simple visual direction and just well executed visual direction too. And I think there's a lot of that, like just strong shot choice that isn't trying to do too much, because like that's the kind of thing that I really gravitate towards. And I think this movie's definitely that. This is a 4-star movie for me, and I will recommend it for people. I liked this movie quite a bit.
Interesting. Yeah, this will be a good discussion. I'll say, like, I have respect for this movie and for what Sofia was doing, and I think I respect Sofia as a director.
Sure.
I did do, like, a very brief kind of best of watching of some of her movies because I haven't seen very many, and so I kind of understand her style a little better, and I will say that, I still do. I respect her as a auteur and a filmmaker. I had some issues. But now that we've done our reviews, you do have to give a spoiler warning.
I do. Pew, 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 and I gotta do the thing, so set the timer up for me.
And you gotta summarize. You gotta do the thing, and we have no idea what that is. You gotta summarize the movie, and you have 2 minutes to do so. And I have a timer for you for that. So
okay.
Where's my camera? And ready?
I haven't done this in so long. Let's go.
I know, because it's always me.
I'm ready.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so we start off with a young Priscilla Bolio, and we are in a West Germany base, a military base in the U.S., and she's a teenager there, and she's bored. And then this colonel approaches her and says, "Hey, do you like Elvis?" and invites her to an Elvis party. She goes to an Elvis party, and then she goes to a bunch of Elvis parties, and Elvis and her start dating. And there's like conversations with her parents and her dad. And her dad's like, "Well, son, I guess you can date my daughter then." And then eventually she starts going on trips to the United States because Elvis has gone back to the United States. And then they have another conversation where it's like, "Well, son, I guess you can date my daughter." And then she goes and moves to the United States eventually. And then they do drugs. They're doing some drugs as they're doing this, but it's not like hard drugs. It's not like hard drug. It's not like hard drug generally. It's just like, what are they doing? They're popping pills. Well, there are some hard drugs. Oh, no. But what I mean by that is that it's not like they're snorting lines in the bathroom. It's just these little pills and like, Elvis is revealed to be kind of abusive, not a very nice guy. He can be very aggressive. He's very dismissive of Priscilla. He kind of confines her to the house, kind of isolates her in a variety of ways. And then as his life spirals, he keeps going out to Hollywood. There are all these rumors that he's with all these different actors. Eventually they have a kid, and then he like wants to break up with her briefly, and then he's like, nope. And then they have a kid, and then she goes and spends some time by herself as he is like kind of doing his Vegas residency thing. And then she asks for a divorce in Vegas. Then she leaves. Then she drives out of Graceland, and then she's free.
And you have more time.
Thinking about things that I forgot because I feel like there are a few details, a few plot beats here and there. Elvis keeps telling her to keep the home fires burning, and so yeah.
Great. You did it, and with time to spare. Things I would add. I don't know.
This is not a.
Get married?
They do get married. I don't think I said that. Oh, she graduates high school about 2/3 of the way into this movie too. Forgot about that.
Yeah. We can start a discussion now. I saw someone say on Twitter like that's such a baller move for this movie to be like they've been together for so long, and then like somewhere before the middle, I don't know, like 40 minutes in, only then has she graduated high school. Yeah. Like just to really point out how fucked that was. Yeah. And like some people in the movie are very clearly like, it's fucked that you are 14 and he is. They never say his age, but like I said, he's 24.
What I think is very interesting is that there's like a couple comments here and there, but no one really seems to give a shit. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting thing. Like, there's the one blonde lady who kind of lives at Graceland, and I don't remember what her role or name was, but she's a little, like, you can tell she's kind of just in the background, like, gazing in a, like, I don't know. I don't really like this.
Which blonde lady? There's the stepmom, and there's the receptionist who works.
It's the blonde lady who... The blonde lady who at some point tells her, like, not to make a public display while she's out on the lawn. She's kind of in the background. That's Elvis's stepmother. Oh, okay.
Because his mama died.
His mama died, yep. But yeah, I like that. And I like... It's also interesting. There's, like, another moment where, like, a few women are, like, gossiping, and they're like, oh, she's, like, a child at, like, a party, and that's it. But other than that, I actually think it's really interesting how, again, it's this kind of like blending of child and adult worlds that I was kind of alluding to in my pre-spoiler review. And I think that it's very interesting to me, one, that the ages of the people she's with are ambiguous and we don't actually know, because I think that's like from, again, like from her perspective, they're just like vaguely adults. And but I also think that within that it's interesting that they're acting like children for most of the thing. Like a good chunk of this movie is just devoted to a bunch of grown men acting like teenage boys and like roughhousing around the lawn and stuff like that. And like it's like, yeah, of course this would be like, I don't know, how do you grapple with that as a child? How does this world make any sense to you as an adolescent? I guess she's not like a child, but like she's a minor. She's young.
Yeah. No, I definitely picked up on that. The idea that like one of the things the movie's kind of like conveying is the in a similar way to Killers of the Flower Moon, like the complicity of grooming is the word I'm going to choose to use here, of like having like taking a child and kind of like is it grooming or just like dating a minor? I don't know. It's kind of both.
It's a bit of both.
There's elements of grooming for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I'll just call it grooming largely to just for simplicity's sake. But the complicity of that, the complicit nature of that, I found really interesting. How there's so many authority figures at Graceland, and they all just like blindly accept that this is happening. And they're just like, "Oh, you're so awesome, Priscilla. We like you." Like Elvis's grandmother is like super nice and shows no concern at all. I mean, obviously Elvis's friends weren't gonna do anything. They're the way they're portrayed at the very least is just like these kind of like you said, idiots just kind of roughhousing together. And yeah, I thought that was interesting. I guess I wasn't sure that it was really interrogating the other people quite as much as it was interrogating Elvis. I think this movie has its sights set on Elvis and less so much on the people who surround him, and I think that's fine. But I don't know. I would have liked a little more of like how this was allowed to happen, I guess. And you do have to consider that there were culture or like social differences at the time, I guess.
Like it's like the
less
thing where
weird than it was now.
You hear like a grandparent's story of like, yeah, I was a 25-year-old man with my own business, and I saw her coming out of high school one day, and we got married or whatever. Yeah.
So like it was a little more normal then. So it's hard to be like, yeah, but everyone was like, this is weird, or I don't know. But I at the very least, I think that there is a minor interrogation of Priscilla's parents, and I thought that was smart. Kind of like it's quite subtle, but it's like they know that she's young, but they are convinced. They're kind of like convinced by Elvis's charming personality, and there's like it's almost like an exchange of goods. Even like there's like a lot of like debates in other rooms, not quite closed behind closed doors, but conversations Priscilla isn't allowed to take part of. Priscilla's mother isn't allowed to take part of. It's a transaction between two men, between Elvis, sometimes Elvis's kind of liaison, his buddy, and Priscilla's father. That's how this all goes down. It's almost contractual, and so I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, just building on that as well, like speaking on like some of the visual direction I really like is that, like, I just love the way that's framed, where she's clearly not a part of these conversations, and often when the people who can actually decide whether this relationship happens, when those conversations are going on, in some way, shape, or form, she's separated from it with visual direction. And it's so in the one way, it's that she's looking through a doorway and she can't quite see what's going on. That's like one of the things when Elvis is talking to the dad and stuff. But then there's also a really interesting one where she's sitting in a booth, and this is before she's met Elvis, and she's sitting in a booth with her family, and the guy, Elvis's buddy, liaison, whatever, comes up and talks to the father and asks if Priscilla can go to the party, and we get really close on this single of Priscilla that separates her from the rest of the table, and it's just her listening to it. And so that builds into my next point as well, where I think not only is this movie, because you're saying, I think you're correct in saying that this movie is not really concerned with the other people in this movie as much. I actually think it's not even really concerned with Elvis that much. I think it's very, very concerned with exactly Priscilla and how a girl of her age would be receiving all of this. And I think that is the driving thesis of this movie. That's I think it motivates like everything in it. And so I think like there, I agree there isn't much of an analysis of complicity other than what she would pick up on, but I think that that's because she wouldn't. I don't know if she would think about that. I don't know if she would have thought about that at all when she was in that, when she was going through these things. The only things that, the reason it's so subtle to me is because we only get her perspective, which is a glimpse through a doorway, or it's her listening. It's that feeling of like being a kid with your family and they're having an adult conversation here, and you know that you're not part of it despite the fact that you're physically in the same space. And I think like that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say that from what I know about, so I'll preface by what I have seen. So just talking about Sofia Coppola's work in a wider sense, I've seen her first three films, if I'm not mistaken, which are Virgin Suicides, the Lost in Translation, which I've seen twice, and Marie Antoinette. From what I've gathered, Sofia Coppola is very good at like portraying like empathy and subjective experiences. So like really getting at the heart of the the feeling of certain kind of like situations, I guess.
Sure.
So Marie Antoinette, which I don't know if I might just talk about it now, but like a very, very similar film. Have you seen this, Aidan?
I've not. I think I've only seen Lost in Translation. It's the only other, which I don't like.
So I know. So Marie Antoinette is, I would say, almost exactly the same movie. It is a famous female historical figure who is married too young, and what that situation feels like. And Marie Antoinette, the atmosphere and the mise en scène are different, but the general structure, the story, the heart of the story is the exact same. Marie Antoinette gets married to someone she doesn't know. She is a child, but in that case, her husband is a child as well. Like, he's quite young, and they're both kind of like struggling with this, and she has all these like responsibilities she has to do, and she just wants to be like a regular young woman and have fun and buy things and play pretend, and it's kind of like her living in her own world in this mansion where she's stuck, and eventually tragedy, whatever. But even like another really interesting, I think The Virgin Suicides is one of her most interesting films, in that one is about, it's interrogating this idea of like female subjectivity, but the film itself is through the subjective view of boys. So that's why that movie is so interesting, is because of like the irony of it. It's about these five sisters, some or all of whom commit suicide, as suggested by the title, and spoilers for like a 30-year-old movie. But almost the whole thing is portrayed from the lens of men recollecting what their experience of these events from the past. So the narrator is older, and he's remembering these events, and it's showing the limitations of these boys, of how they can't really perceive, and it's a really good interrogation through this like lens of irony. So I agree for Priscilla that what she's doing so well is that subjective experience. She is getting to the heart of like the empathy of it. What does it feel like to be in Priscilla's situation? And so I really do agree with you that like that seems to be the narrative thematic purpose of this film, is what did it feel like to be Priscilla during those maybe like 14 years, I think was about the time that they knew each other, and maybe a little bit less so on making a point of anything else. And for that, personally, I was kind of hoping for something a little more rich to chew on, but I can see a case being made like that's your aspirations were just kind of set lower, and that's fine. Like for if that's what your goal was,
Well,
to just portray this
I
subjective
disagree.
experience. That's
I
a
disagree
different thing,
saying
you know what
that's
I mean?
lower though. I think that's just a different thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes it like it doesn't. It's not
Maybe
a
not
value
lower.
judgment.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah. But that leads into your point about it being 14 years leads into something that I think was very, very interesting about this movie. And that's that, like, the way time is played with in this movie, the way that neither Elvis or Priscilla or anyone else really in this movie seems to age very much. Like, only towards the end does she starts to look a little bit different and Elvis starts to look a little bit different. But you compare that to, like, the Elvis movie, for example, where it's like he's a fucking wreck. Like, he looks very physically different by the end of that movie. And, like, they really make a point about how much time has passed. But this movie seems like this sprawling fantasy that just, like, very intentionally kind of meanders through. And I really, really like the way that it, to me, that exemplifies how this situation inhibited her growth. Like, she wasn't able to explore herself, and she wasn't able to grow very much as a person individually because of the way she was isolated by this situation. And so everything was kind of the same until, like, the very end. And then it's not until she, like, separates from Elvis that we see it, like, it's almost like that's when time starts to have somewhat of an effect. Yeah. And I think that's very intentional, because I think it's done both in, like, costuming and makeup and whatever. It's also done in visual direction, because one of the things that I've written down here is visual motifs and repeated shots, and specifically the repeated shots. The Elvis and Priscilla lying in bed together is throughout the movie almost always filmed from the same shot. It's like a kind of 45-degree angle looking at, like, the corner of the bed, like, sort of from the foot angle, whatever. And we get that again to establish this idea of sameness and mundanity and whatever. But towards the end, when Priscilla this is very soon before Priscilla goes to divorce him. This is when Elvis kind of forces himself on her briefly, but then goes away. We finally see, like, the bed from a different perspective, and it's a different bed, sure, but we've already seen that bed from the same mundanity perspective. And this, again, like, the simple idea that, like, something has changed and we're now seeing this from a different angle. It's this idea that, like, suddenly there's a breakthrough, and this feeling of just, like, your life was just sucked up like that, and she just fell into it. And like we talked about, it almost, like, wasn't her decision in a lot of ways. Like, that's so, and then you get to the ending and she's just like like, just in the car, like unable to understand what just happened. I was like, oh my god. Yeah. So the way this movie is playing with all of its various elements to really emphasize that subjectivity, and talking about different aspects of that subjectivity, like the experience of time, power dynamics, adult children world, that's really, like, that's what's making this movie so enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I'll respond to just one of those elements at a time. So the time aspect, I did notice certain things. So what I really liked about the time is kind of contrary to what you're saying, but maybe sort of supporting it, is how it's actually it's a compliment to the acting as well as the costuming and the makeup. How one actor, what is her name, Kaylee Spaney, is able to play Priscilla over a wide, like, I think, well, it would have been 14 years or whatever I had said, right?
Yeah.
So, like, a wide variety of ages, and, like, I completely believed it the whole time. And when she was supposed to be in 9th grade, I was like, this is, like, the tiniest, youngest human I've seen. And, like, she felt like she was in 9th grade, and it made the Elvis scenes really creepy, of, like, that is a grown man dating a child, like a teenager. And then, like, again, not changing the actor at any point, I can see actually the progression of time in the way they are changing her costuming. She starts dressing like towards the end, it's like blouses and like pants. She changes her hair at some point, and I think especially then when she's changing her hair, that's when I felt like the rapid change that you had mentioned. It's like, oh, like, she's living again, like she's kind of out of the trap. She stopped dyeing her hair black, and it suddenly felt like I was looking at like a completely different person. It was crazy when like
Yes.
the scene where
Yeah.
she's
There's one scene
like,
where I straight up
talking-
didn't recognize her. Yeah.
There's scenes where she's talking with her friends in Hollywood, and I was like, oh my god, like this is the same actor who I thought was in ninth grade at the beginning. I was like, I actually was like, how old is this actor? Like, did they make
Yeah, I looked
did
it
they
up
do an
after.
Elvis
Yeah.
behind the scenes? I was like, no, of course they didn't, because why would that would
Yeah.
be really stupid. But like
Yeah.
like I was shocked, just like at how well, and that actor I think is
Yeah.
a year, 2 years younger than Jacob Elordi. Crazy.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's
so
insane.
compliments for all of that.
Yeah.
I
I will say,
oh yeah, do
I
you
want to jump in. I want to jump in really quick as well. In that, I do agree with you. I think what we're saying actually does support each other. But I think it's really interesting as well how we, despite it being from her perspective, we also have a very limited perspective. Like, we only get like these flashes, especially towards the latter half of the movie. Like, and I really like how when something happens, like Elvis blows up at her for like the first few times, we really get the impression that like this is something she's used to by this point. Like, it's not a surprise. Like, they actually have like learned to kind of mold around each other a little bit, and it's very interesting. It was like, I don't know exactly what to make of it, but it was like, well, how long has that been happening? And I think that makes you question like the veneer of a relationship, and it makes you think about what other people must have been seeing. Yeah.
Almost like that's making me think of Anatomy of a Fall a little bit. All these movies we're seeing recently just kind of like work together. Yeah, for like the jumping around in time. Yeah, I'll say that that this is a common thing with biopics, is how do you depict a person's life in kind of like a coherent cinematic form when it's like trying to reduce decades at a time. So I think it was first of all, smart choice to confine it to a very specific period of Priscilla's life. To like, it's not her entire life. It is
like Elvis.
literally the Elvis period of her life. And I think it's quite smart that the first time we see her is, hey, do you want to meet Elvis? And the last time we see her is leaving Graceland. And that's it. And there's no more. So I think that was smart. One issue I just sometimes have with biopics is that feeling of like jumping around in time a bit. Just kind of like, it's hard to see like a story in there, because it is just kind of like picking moments across the years. So I'd say that I've seen worse version of this for sure, and so I think Sofia,
like Elvis.
Yeah, like Elvis. So I think Coppola does a commendable job of kind of like summarizing the events and turning them into like a coherent story. But I think even then there were some limitations, and I'll try and see if I had anything specific. Yeah, I think my main issue is just that the feeling of jumping around has to do with like causality a little bit, and kind of like following the unity of action, I suppose, like following one thing. You're playing with the unity of time, obviously, so you kind of want to keep the other things consistent, I suppose. And I just felt that for a while, it did feel like, okay, then this happened, and then, a few months later this happened, and then a few months later this happened, and I was kind of like waiting for the story. This ties into a different point. Like, this is mostly an issue with the second act, is what I had. I felt it kind of started repeating itself. There's, early on we see the relationships. He's stuck in Graceland, and, Elvis has these outbursts. He tries to make advances. He won't, he won't have sex with her, but nothing happens. And he goes away. He goes to Hollywood. They hear some events, and it did for a while kind of feel like they were stuck. And just kind of, repeating the same beat over and over again, of like, she is sad and quiet and in Graceland. That being said, I'll just say one more thing. There is a case for like that being the point, and
that is the case.
While I know, and while it occurred to me, and while I was like getting quite sleepy and being like, this is wearing me down. It's tiring. Of like, okay, when's when redoing it, the thought occurred to me that like that is actually her subjective experience, and in that sense, that is kind of like the goal is to put you in the headspace. And if you're feeling like you're stuck, like dull watching this movie, maybe that's intentional. It means it's not a great viewing experience, trying to like put you in the driver's seat of boredom, but that's a a question about cinema on a wider scale is like replicating crappy experiences or like purposefully making a movie in such a way that traditionally they say don't do that. Like they tell you not to make movies this way because of X, Y, and Z, but doing it on purpose to make a point, that's a really interesting concept to me. But I'll let you chime in on that.
Yeah, talking about specifically causality right away, something I noticed as well was that there seemed like a lack of causality. And again, the thing I liked about that was that it felt like she didn't have much agency. Like it felt like she had been...
I agree, yeah.
She cannot move forward because everything is just happening to her. Like she can't... She's become not an active agent in her own life because her life now revolves around Elvis and the schedule of Elvis. And I agree that there is a lot of sameness, but again, like this is just like a difference of experiencing, I guess. I also felt bored at some points, but I kind of liked it, and I liked exploring. I liked being in this house, and I liked how empty I liked how the lighting really added to it for me. Like how there's often like the indoor lights like aren't on, and there's just like light coming through the window. And I think it gives this really strong mood. And I also think that I really like the restraint that Coppola shows. Like, because I think what a lesser movie would do is Elvis leaves, she's sad, and every time she has like a breakdown in the bathroom and she like cries and she like sobs. That would be a lesser movie. And what I like a lot about this movie, because that would just cheapen. So that way, like the few times she like does cry in this movie, it's like, oh my god. But like that would cheapen it. What I like about this movie is that I think just through really simple things, they actually do differentiate it a little bit. They're just in the middle of what seemingly is like a happier period, like when Elvis is back and she's with him and like, cause like this is her life now, But there's just this one shot of her just like standing and looking out the window, just like motionless, and she's looking through the curtain, and it's just like this idea of we don't quite, because she's been so forced to repress and she isn't able to express herself in this relationship and in her life anymore, we don't get it either. It's almost like because we're from her perspective, but because she doesn't get a chance to like truly express herself, we also don't get to see self-expression from her. And I think that's really interesting, other than just like little moments and things here and there, like her looking out the window like that. And I also just wanted to broadly talk about really quickly, I do think that whenever I'm bored in a movie, this is like a broader point about movies in general, whenever I'm bored, I'm always just like, okay, but why? Like, why am I bored right now? Because I did get a little bored in this movie. And I think that another movie that I got bored during was At an Arduat, The Fast Runner, which is a Canadian movie. That's a movie I love.
Yes.
I think it's a very cool
movie.
movie.
Yes, I did. I got tired too. Yeah.
That's a movie I got bored
That's
watching.
long.
Another movie I got bored watching, Tarkovsky's Solaris.
To be fair, though, that one, the Fast Runner one, we were on Zoom in our own homes trying to watch that.
Sure.
That was kind of a brutal situation, just based on our university
I think that even if I saw that in a theater, I would have been a little bored. And when I was watching Tarkovsky's Solaris, I got a little bit bored. There's at one point in that movie, I believe they go to space in that movie. But before they go to space, I believe it's like 10 minutes of almost uninterrupted, just the characters driving on like the highway and then through a city. And they don't really say much. And like, and I think that like, that's very intentional, and I agree you're making an interesting point about like what is the point of film in general, and why is that something that you can't do. I think that, and so again, looping back to what I was saying earlier, like, why am I bored? am I bored because this is a contrived plot and I don't care about what's happening? Or am I bored because the feelings and the empathy that this movie is evoking is just a life that isn't necessarily full of thrills? Because looping back to Priscilla, like I said, like I really love the idea that on one hand it should be like this fantasy that she's with Elvis, and I think they're like it has this like haze of being like a dreamy fantasy, but at the same time like she's there and it's like, oh, it's just life. And it's just like it's just a feeling that like you've also I feel like everyone's been through as well. Like everyone's just been bored in their house, and it's like that's just her life now, especially as a kid. Like like a child's experience as well. So yeah, just like on the topic of boredom, whenever I feel bored in a movie, I always, and I'm not saying you, I don't mean this as criticism of what you're thinking, but I just mean just personally, I always like to reflect on like, I don't like to immediately think of that as a criticism, because I'm always just like,
Right.
why is this happening?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very interesting, almost philosophical question of just like the way we view films as a culture. I'd say even from the beginning is that film should be entertainment, and there's certain emotions that and like states of being that are acceptable for film to create. It's acceptable to create joy, laughter, sometimes anger, sadness, fear, but there's other emotions, namely boredom, that we just routinely have just kind of like have lumped into like that means it's bad, like it's a negative thing. But it is interesting to ask like, but what if that's just like another tool in a director, in a filmmaker's like thing they hold tools in, you know, whatever
Right.
that is.
Yeah.
Toolbox. I don't know. We're filmmakers. We don't. What is that?
Yeah, we
What's
don't
a
know.
tool?
We don't know that unless we're working in
What's
set
a
deck.
hammer?
Then we understand. Then we know what that is.
I have a lot of tools.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, no.
Yeah,
It's
the
definitely an
irony
interesting
there is that you
question.
actually do use a lot of tools making film.
I have a lot of tools, and
Yeah.
they're like a stone's throw away from me right now. I could go like, anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd say, I
But
might
to
have
be
to
clear,
revisit it and like
I'm also. I'm not saying you're wrong either. Like I also think like it's possible that like the movie just doesn't explore things well enough, but just from my initial reaction, I was just more appreciative of it than anything else.
no, and I agree. I don't see it as like me being wrong or you being right. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if I had to think about like what I was hoping for, just like I don't know. Every time I try to think of like what I would hope for, I kind of realize like, but maybe that's not what her life was like. So,
Sure.
one of the things I wrote was like, it would be nice if there was like a subplot of like what does she do when she's at Graceland? Is just kind of this question
Sure.
I had, and like, how do I keep track of time? Did she do stuff? Like, did she? This is a weird, like, it's just a random example, but like, did she learn the piano? That would be an example of like a
Sure.
subplot. Just like, what does she do while Elvis is gone? And I honestly can't see like I'm of two minds of like as much as
Sure.
I'm like that was not entertaining to watch. I say to myself, but isn't that the point? Like, what if she truly did not do anything when Elvis was gone? And like, I don't believe that's true, but like, you know,
Or
the
even if she
point
did,
is,
what if? Yeah.
yeah, the point that is trying to be
Please.
made is like, imagine being bored and stuck in a house for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And so any kind of like evidence of like, oh, but she did stuff while he was gone is like kind of counter to the point and kind of like undercuts it, I suppose. Okay, here's something I will say though.
Sure.
I did find that even if that's like fine, I did find that the characters were one note. So I found that the decision for the characters was Priscilla is a victim of this kind of like situation of Elvis kind of grooming her, and he's got a dark side. This is dark Elvis. This is dark Elvis, and he's bad. Like sure he can have fun and he can be kind of like charming, but it is kind of like
Sure.
something with some. It's always I felt from the beginning that this is someone with like a dark undercurrent, like kind of like a this is not a good dude. And Priscilla is like this innocent person who is just like an innocent teenage girl who's just in love with this guy and is a victim of these circumstances. And like on paper, like I agree that like she was probably she was a victim of these
Sure.
circumstances and he was grooming her in like a predatory way. I do agree with that. But I think as far as a movie goes, I did find it kind of like uninteresting to have such a not a performance so lacking in nuance. Not a performance, just like a portrayal, how the characters are written. I found to be lacking in nuance. It was kind of like Elvis is, he's goofing around with the boys a lot of the time, but he just I didn't like him at any point, and I don't think you're
Sure.
supposed to. And Priscilla does kind of it's something that happens sometimes where when you're making a biopic with the person who it's about is alive and also executive producer on the film, it's kind of hard to ask really tough questions like this person who was a victim, what are their flaws? Like, did they have any flaws? And I think there's one moment where Priscilla shows a bit of flaws. She cheats on an exam to graduate high school, but other than that, I did find that it was just kind of like that was it. It was just girl trying to like wait around for, and I just found that not particularly interesting. I didn't see a lot of nuance, like I said. And one other thing I'll add is that there was actually a quote from Lisa Marie Presley, the child who was in the movie as an adult, who actually passed away this year. She passed away in January. But before that, obviously, she written an email to Sofia Coppola, and she said in the email, my father only comes across as a predator and manipulative. As his daughter, I don't read this and see any of my father in this character. I don't read this and see my mother's perspective of my father. I read this and see your shockingly vengeful and contemptuous perspective, and I don't understand why. Now, I will say, like, with an asterisk, someone who is so close to that experience would not be surprising that they didn't pick up, like, predatory nature. Like, that's your dad and your mom, and it's hard to kind of, like, take a step back and analyze things. But I think it is also important to recognize that perspective of, like, if that's how she perceived events, maybe there's a nugget of truth to that. And I felt that nugget of like, was there love? Like, I didn't feel that quite strongly. Or like, was Elvis sometimes a good person? I didn't see, and I was kind of wanting that again for a little more nuance. Not everyone is wholly evil or wholly good.
Sure. I mean, just responding to like the daughter thing, like, I don't know what really happened, and so I'm just watching a movie. You know what I mean? So like I don't know. Like, I saw that too, but I was just like, couldn't tell you. But what I will say is this one where actually I do just straight up disagree with you, because I think that for a character to be nuanced, that doesn't mean they ever have to be shown as good. I think that they just have to have complicated motivations and feelings. Because if the movie is just trying to show a particular perspective of Elvis, and again, I don't think it's supposed to be an entire summation of him as well, I think that it does actually a very good job of it. And so, for example, there are a few things that I think are interesting. One, we're kind of held at an arm's length from Elvis in a lot of ways. It almost gives this sense that, like, Priscilla never was able to know this guy very much. And again, I don't know what actually happened, but just saying that's what is in the movie. And I think that's well done in a number of ways. Like, especially near the beginning, his face is often like in shadow. Like, you don't really get to see him. And when she first sees him, it's not some grand reveal. He's just sitting there, and he's almost not identifiable as Elvis in the frame. And you have to like look for a second. I think that's really well done. And I disagree that he doesn't have interesting motivations, though. I think that right away I was actually very gripped by like, what is going on with this guy? Like, what am I supposed to make of him? Because I think that he's genuinely reeling from the loss of his mother. I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Yeah.
is true. And I think that he's looking for a woman to fill that spot in his life. And I think it's very interesting that he chooses a 14-year-old girl. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, it's almost like he does want this sort of maternal role. He even talks about later, like, he's in talking about like a different actor who, oh no, he's talking about an actress who like puts the job before her husband, and she's like, I just can't work. He's like, I just can't work with that. And it's like, again, like
Yeah.
this idea of like roles that he needs to fill in his life. So there's that, and I think that's really interesting. Another thing I think is really interesting about this character is that he's kind of like a vampire of her youth. And I think that like that's clearly like the fact that he's asking her like, what are the kids listening to, and he's in this stage, he
Mm-hmm.
meets her in this stage in his life where he almost feels disconnected from his stardom. And it's almost like the reason he's able to be like slightly more vulnerable with this girl is because like the legend of Elvis is perhaps not as extravagant as it once was. And I think it's like he's using her as a bridge to be that once again. And so as long as that's true, they have what seems like a somewhat decent relationship. Again, it's gross, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying in the beginning, and it seems like they get along, and like this is something like she really likes him, he really likes her. And I think it's really interesting that the moment he gets back, and like suddenly this stardom is back, and suddenly like he is this guy again, and it actually is working, like that changes and he's able to bury it. And then I also think like we really witness a guy who's just lost and is trying to grapple onto different identities. And I think that ties into a greater point the movie is making, or a greater exploration the movie is making into identity in general. And then I think both of these characters are people who don't really have one, and like they don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what their identity is. And so I think like, Elvis tries to like he gets into like books, but then someone tells him not to. Like, you know what I mean? Like the colonel calls him up and he
Yeah.
says, "Stop that shit," and he burns all of them. And I think that that also speaks to a sort of cycle where it's like Elvis feels trapped in his own life, and I think that there's that, and I think that we see that. And so that comes out as a way of like trapping someone that he feels like he has power over, which is Priscilla. And then I also think Priscilla has a lot of nuance to her as well, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, just in response to the Elvis stuff, I was gonna say what you said right at the end, and I was like, oh man, he took away. So yeah, I was gonna say that. What's interesting is that just mostly based on contextual knowledge from Elvis,
From
the
Elvis.
other movie,
Yeah, I literally was
like,
thinking while I was watching this, I was like, I'm glad I saw Elvis actually, because that
Yeah.
actually does put a lot of this into perspective.
Yeah, which is almost an issue I have with this movie is the fact that like I do have to rely on knowledge of another movie. I mean,
But
for
I
some
don't
people
know.
you might say like you would know like cultural knowledge, but
Sure.
that was so long ago now that for us that's irrelevant. We don't have cultural knowledge of
The
Elvis
thing is,
in the same way.
because I saw Elvis, obviously I'm going to be thinking about it when I watch this. I don't know
Yeah.
what comes across and what doesn't to someone who hasn't seen that movie. It's like when Dune came
Yeah.
out and I had read the book and I was very curious as to like, how did you understand what this meant? Because I felt like it was vague in the movie and I knew what it meant. But then other people were like, yeah, I knew what that meant. So it's like, okay.
Yeah. So like I think the Colonel Tom Parker thing is a great example of something that is like so unclear in this movie, and I only
don't agree.
understand. No, I that's how I feel, and it's
Yeah.
I think it's only the fact that I saw an entire movie of Tom Hanks doing a silly accent in a fat suit. Like that's the only reason why I like understand the Elvis perspective. It's tough, is what I'll say. I think what you're saying is Elvis's deal. That is intriguing to me as someone as like you and I are the same, but like Elvis and Priscilla, of like two people who feel like kids, one of them literally a child, who feel trapped, and it's like that cycle of like Colonel Tom Parker is the puppet master of Elvis, and because he feels like he has no control, that the reason why he gravitates towards Priscilla is it's someone who he can control. He has control over this person. Where all the other women throwing themselves at him, he's like either like not the most important thing in his life, or they're all the same. Like it's all the fans are just like kind of, I don't know if vapid's the right word, but like they don't. It's kind of one dimensional. They only like what they think of him, and I don't know. So like I definitely see that, and thinking back on it, I also see hints of like a man constantly trying to find his identity, but I also feel like Elvis's perspective and like what he's going through is not the focus. It's only hinted at. And I think I did kind of find it funny and really annoying when it was intellectual, philosophical Elvis.
Oh, I
like,
rolled my eyes at him.
Yeah. And I think I also like clearly intentional. Like that's what she wants you to feel. Is like this man is so annoying and will not shut the fuck up. But like, yeah, I think my issue is like, although it's definitely supposed to be from the perspective of Priscilla, I was kind of hoping for a little more of that, like, but like think of what Elvis is going through, and I think you could do that from Priscilla's perspective. And for me personally, I just feel like there wasn't. I don't know. It's also weird to say like I wanted more of Elvis's perspective, like the guy who had an entire movie dedicated to him. Was it last year? And you know, like people like know him and his story and all that, but like I don't know. That's kind of what I meant by nuance. Is like because it is from the perspective of a single character and barely sways from that. It did kind of feel like I didn't get like the whole situation, and I kind of wish I had, I guess.
But I don't think the whole situation is necessary. And I don't think like I mean like this is just an agree to disagree thing. Like I just think there is nuance through her perspective. I think that because we're only getting hints of him, he's actually more interesting, and it puts you in the perspective of someone who's trying to figure out what is going on with this guy, because that's the same perspective that movie Priscilla, and I'm differentiating because I don't know the real person, but I'll just say like Priscilla in the movie, like that's the same thing she's trying to do. She's trying to I don't think she ever knows if this guy actually loves her, and like how isolating and how horrible that must feel. And that ties in directly to, again, I think Priscilla is actually a very nuanced character in this. Well, I don't agree that she's one note. I think that her perspective is very interesting. I think that she doesn't necessarily have a flaw in that, like, there's this like screenwriter thing where it's like, here's a list of things strong characters need, and I always hate that shit. And I think I always hate that shit. And it's just a list of things and like their fatal flaw or whatever. Maybe not their fatal flaw, but a list of whatever. And what I like about this movie is that I think it's just like, if you're trying to do this almost like naturalistic perspective, I don't know how aware of her own flaws she'd necessarily be. And I also think that the flaw that is presented is that she is quite naive. And yes, she's a child, so of course she's naive. Like, of course she doesn't quite understand. She's not dumb. The movie doesn't say she's dumb. But just because the movie is giving a reason for why she's like that, for why she doesn't quite understand what's going on and why she doesn't make very good decisions for herself, just because the movie is empathetic as to why she's doing that, doesn't make it not a flaw. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's showing like a well-rounded human being, I think. And yeah, I don't agree.
No, that's fair. What I'll add on to this conversation with some information I gathered from Wikipedia, our favorite resource. So I looked up Priscilla's Wikipedia page to see like what the movie covers and what it doesn't cover, and there were some tidbits that I found interesting that were left out of the film. Some of them make the situation look worse for Elvis, and other ones kind of add some complications that are some examples of some nuance that I was like, oh, that might have been interesting to see a bit of. So it's a bit of a list, but I'll try and get through this. So part of the agreement for bringing Priscilla over to Memphis, to Graceland, like moving there, part of the agreement even then was that he would eventually marry her. So like, I don't think that was
I don't remember
clearly
that being said,
stated.
no.
So I think that's really interesting. Like even then, when she was like still underage, like they knew they were like marrying her off essentially. Um, while she was in Graceland for a while, she lived with Elvis's father and stepmother in a separate house before eventually moving in with Elvis. Um, what does that say? This is a little bit. This is one of those things that's like maybe it's fine because it's from her perspective and she might not have known, but apparently there was a morals clause in Elvis's deal with RCA, and I think there's like you hear like a telephone call about this that forced Elvis to marry Priscilla. He had to marry her because they saw he was like sleeping around with other people and they were gonna drop him because he was immoral, and that was part of the contract. There was after they got married, there was a honeymoon moment of bliss. I think some of this comes from her memoir that this is based on too. She said this. I don't know if it's a direct quote. I might have mistyped it, but she said something along the lines of, "I loved playing house. I like that I got to take care of him myself. No maids or housekeepers, and I don't think we got to see the honeymoon." And so that's an example.
We do
of like,
see a bit of that though, of her taking a role of playing house and taking care of him. I think we do see.
There's a
that.
part where she's literally in a maid costume, which I was like, "That's gross." Thanks. Yeah. So that's an example of some nuance I would have liked, and then also the fact that she had affairs while she was with Elvis. That was a big thing that I was like, "Hold on now, what?" So she had an affair with a private dance instructor, and then later, her karate instructor, who we do see portrayed in the film.
That is also
that one
hinted at.
is insinuated, but
Yeah.
literally you
Sure,
see him
but
in
so but
two scenes that are very brief montage.
but
scenes.
Elvis's affairs are insinuated. They're also not confirmed in this movie.
But whose perspective is the movie from?
From
So this
Priscilla's,
is what
but
I'm saying. Is,
no, because we
Well,
don't.
no, let me
that
finish,
doesn't
let
mean
me
that doesn't
finish.
mean we need to know everything.
Okay, but this is what I'm saying is that this is kind of like a thing that complicates the issue and paints Priscilla in a different light, and that's the kind of thing that I like in film is when even someone who is like clearly the victim in this scenario does things that people would say, you know, like they make choices that are interesting, not necessarily morally bad. I'm not going to condemn Priscilla, the movie character or the real person, for having affairs because she was with Elvis for like that long and like he was being shitty. But I think that's interesting. I think that's a level of nuance that they chose to take out. And I'm just like,
So
you're
I
telling
disagree.
me she
I disagree with that framing
let
of
me,
it.
Let me finish though.
Keep-
The whole point of the movie is that, not the whole point. A big point of the movie is that his infidelity, and I think a great addition to that theme is exploring that. Then that led her to her own infidelity. That's a really cool character progression.
His infidelity, his infidelity itself, I don't think matters that much in this movie. It's the
it matters an incredible amount.
No, shut up. Let me finish. You were just talking for so long. Okay, yeah. It's her, the uncertainty that brings her. And I'll say this, like I've kind of hinted this earlier, I don't really care what actually happened. I don't really care. I'm looking at like what the movie is, and this is about a girl that like remains a girl instead of becoming a woman, like instead of growing up and being an adult because of the circumstances she's in. And like, sure, like there are a million things in her life that I'm sure you could have portrayed, but I like that this is a very focused view. I disagree that it's lacking nuance because it didn't put this thing of her life in. I just fundamentally don't agree with that.
I agree that it's focused, and I do generally like focus, especially in a sprawling look at a character's life. But this is the kind of thing where, you know, I was listening to some people discuss some biopics recently, and this kind of springs to mind. Just the idea that like when you're doing a biopic and a documentary. When you're doing a documentary about someone, there's been a lot of them recently about, especially like people who were quite big in the '90s. So like David Beckham. Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I haven't watched any of them because I don't give a shit. Anyways, but one thing that came up was like throwing softballs to these people.
Oh, the Beckham one is completely uncritical about him, but that's a doc.
No,
Like,
no,
that's a
okay, but
different
this is
thing.
like this is getting me to a point of like
Sure.
when it's hard to work with someone to produce a creative endeavor and to have their full support of said creative endeavor while remaining critical. And I feel like there are elements of that. And I just feel I feel like the Priscilla movie is uncritical of, and not even like again, I don't think this is a person who we need to be critical of. Like that's
Right.
again like a thing that I'm saying is like the fact that she had affairs is interesting to me and not a moral thing I have against her. I think that makes
Right.
her more human, and that is the issue I have, is that we are taking away layers of her complexity and her humanity, and I would have found that. And also to like your point about like keeping it concise, I think it is concise in the fact that it is still from her subjective point of view, and it has to do with the themes, and that like the fact that it has to do with like her delayed like repressed childhood. I think that has to do with it. The fact that she is finding love at a more mature age, and I think what it does is it makes her seem less like a little girl, and I can see that being counter to the narrative. Like you're trying to say, like this is someone who is just a young person and who was being groomed, and I think the fact that then she had affairs with other people. I don't know what the age difference was then, but I don't know. This is just something that like I'm just kind of like disappointed. I guess I don't know. It feels uncritical. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And I'm saying it doesn't need to be critical considering the goals of the movie. I don't think, and again, like to me, it doesn't matter what really happened. I don't really care. I don't really see this as Priscilla's actual life. Like, and but
I agree with that though. I don't care what happens
no, I know,
either, but
I understand.
I think from a story
But no,
perspective,
no. You talked for so long. Okay, she does not need to. We do not need to be critical of her, and I also think that the story does not need that. I think like it's fine. My big problem with what you're saying is you're acting like things are being omitted, like specific details of her life. But it's like, yeah, of course. And like on one end, like just on a realistic level, like of course things are omitted. You can't tell everything. And on another level, so it's like, of course things are being omitted. And then on another level, it's like you're framing it as an omission, but I see this more as an organic growth of a character that has been written and constructed for a screenplay. And so again, like the fact that she like it wasn't omitted that she had an affair, because I think this is a very different thing. This is not the same. The goals of this movie are not the same as other biopics. It's not the same as Bohemian Rhapsody, which is it's very bad that they omitted a bunch of things in that movie because of what its goals are. It's not the same as Elvis either. It doesn't have the same goals as Elvis. This is trying to portray a specific type of experience, and I think universalize it in a sense. And so, like, sure, they could do this. I don't think that makes it more or less nuanced because they didn't.
Okay, last counterpoint, and then we should move on. I'll just say that I think that lumping in something like her affairs were omitted as if it's like, and then she had brunch on Tuesday and
No,
like,
I'm not saying that.
But like that's like I know you can't have everything, but that's kind of like, not only is it a big thing, it's relevant to the Elvis period and relevant to the story, and also I honestly can't see how the character, like the fictional character you're crafting, cannot have that. Like
I'm not saying that they can't. I'm saying they don't need to.
It's obviously it's a choice thing, right? So I know that I think it's the fundamental disagreement that I don't think that they need to. I think it would have been more interesting if they had.
I don't agree.
And you disagree, and that's okay. But like I just want to get to the point that like that's just a subjective thing, and like whatever. Anyways.
Sure. I just don't think it adds nuance doing that. I don't think it subtracts.
I do. So then
I just don't think it does.
Stop it.
Okay.
Okay. I'll say other things I want to talk about. In terms of like the affairs and stuff like that, like the public perception of people in the movie, I think, is an interesting theme that they do talk about.
Sure.
The like constant newspapers, memorabilia, posters with Jacob Elordi as Elvis's face on it.
There are some of those where it like I was like, is that him or is that a real picture?
I was like, that's Jacob Elordi, but like also I was like,
no,
he looks like Elvis.
There were some where I was like, oh, what? Like they really got it with. I think they did specific makeup for some of those pictures because some of them look very similar.
Maybe they did a face blend, like all of the Batmans.
They did
in one, or all the
They deep faked it. They deep faked Elvis and turned the opacity of the filter down.
Do you know what I'm talking about though?
No.
When they face smash all of the Batman actors and they're like, this is the ideal Bruce Wayne.
Oh, really?
This is what Bruce Wayne actually looks like. Or this is all the Spider-Man actors face smashed. This is what Spider-Man actually looks like. It's great. Anyways, what else can we say? We haven't really talked too much about like the... There it is. The thumbs up.
The thumb is haunting us again. Please... if anyone out there can help, please help get rid of the thumbs up.
I'll say some more like the technical stuff I'll get to.
Sure. Well, I have one more thematic point, and then I think let's get into the technical stuff. Yeah, I also just think, well, this is somewhat technical, but because it ties into visual direction, but the other point of visual direction I have is details, and I just really like the use of inserts to convey this idea of an identity that's being thrust upon Priscilla that she doesn't know how to contend with necessarily. I'm thinking specifically, this happens a few times, but specifically the very opening of this movie is just like, it's her painted toes, and then it's her putting on the like iconic eye makeup and her hair and all of that. And I think that, again, this idea of like a character who's struggling with her own identity, but while having this identity thrust upon her, I think that that's really well done, both narratively and in terms of visual direction, with that kind of insert with various shots here and there.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like something I had written down after the movie was like that Sofia Coppola is the queen of inserts. Like I noticed that in all of her movies, she loves insert shots, and unlike, you know, your run-of-the-mill filmmaker, I would say that she takes as much care for her inserts, and that's like the mark of a really good director is when they treat inserts like they matter, and they do.
The water glass one on the piano, I was like, that's a very interesting
cool
perspective.
That was really cool. You know, and I just love her use of like the long lenses and the looks at the like the really small details. So no, I definitely agree on that. I liked in the cinematography what I called kid height camera. So the idea that the camera is always at her eye level, and Elvis is quite tall, and the idea that we are looking up at him at all times, it really gets you in that perspective, and it makes him look quite domineering and like powerful in very particular scene, like always, but then especially when he like that other side of him reveals itself, you really feel it, and it's like, oh, scary Elvis.
Scary Elvis. And what I like about it as well is then finally towards the end we don't see that same shot pattern. Like not only like usually like usually when we see throughout the film, usually when they're talking to each other, the camera's very like it's like always very eye level of like Priscilla, and it's just because we literally can't even see Jacob Elordi's shoulder. So it's like holy fuck, like this guy's a huge presence. And then when she divorces him towards the end, he's like sprawled on this bed and she's sitting very like upright, and they're finally kind of on the same level. And like she feels very much above him, and she feels it's also, that shot is very interesting to me. She's kind of framed to the left, like she's off centered a little bit, and there's like a plant to the right. And it's just very interesting. It's like a non-traditional single, and I think it's very interesting. I don't know exactly what to make of it, but I liked it. But yeah, I think like there's very precise shot choice here.
Yeah, I think for the most part I agree. There were a couple times where just like a conversation with, I really noticed it in the beginning with Priscilla's mom. I was just like, there were moments that I was just like, this is more normal than the rest of it. I don't know if that's just me, but like I don't know what it was. And I like that actor too. She's from Succession. But anyways, what I will talk about is the lighting though. That was very a very clear intentional choice, and I found it really interesting. basically they don't use overhead lighting at any point, like the lighting a house will have. They would have actually. This is a question. I don't know. In the 1950s, they had interior lighting, right? Like for like ceiling lights.
Yeah.
I don't know when that started, so
Yeah, I think they did.
But like, I was almost sure. I was just like maybe.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
But I like the idea that it's basically only window light, and like the
Yeah.
whole time that's what it is. It's almost. I described it as drab, but like drab with an intention
Yeah.
and a nice looking drab. There's a difference. I've seen drab movies that look drab and like
they're drab movies that are muddy.
drab.
Yeah, and they're like
Bad drab.
Yes.
There's good drab and bad drab.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I really like that. My one thing was wondering, does that ever change? I'm not sure if that was just a look the whole film has, or if is there ever a point where it. I don't think they ever use the overhead lighting, but does it feel less drab at certain times? I can't remember.
Well, there's like the LSD montage that's a little different.
That was interesting.
Where they have those lights. They also have in Vegas the lighting is really interesting, like the shifting neon in Elvis's room. I think that's really fun. It's also like it's kind of there are also different qualities of light that I think differentiate it. Like Graceland is like a little bit warmer than Germany, for example. Like Germany is a bit of like a colder place. Like that's the way it's portrayed anyway. And I think that like rooms are kind of differentiated by the quality of light, but I do think it has this overall windowy feel. I also think this movie is very dark, which I think is really interesting.
It's very shadowy.
Very, very, very shadowy. Like much of the frame is like complete shadow for a good chunk of this movie.
I really like that.
Yeah.
But I have a problem with my theater. I think the brightness is too low, so that I was like, no, it's actually like dim and I cannot see. And I think I think that's an issue of like I've heard this before, but like projector bulbs wear out and you need to replace them, and I'm pretty sure that particular theater has never replaced the bulbs. And like it's not that old, so like I can see why they would feel they wouldn't need to, but I can tell that it is an old bulb, and that if I was watching this at home on my TV or on my computer, like I'd be able to like I wouldn't need to bump up the volume or the brightness. The natural setting would be significantly better, but that's a nitpick for the presentation of it, not a Sofia Coppola issue. Sure. Production design, I thought that was really nice.
Yes,
very
definitely.
Fits the drab. It's so interesting. Like it's 1950s. It's all the things you like linked to that period, like the cars and the style, but everything has been like almost like desaturated, and like the vibrancy, the colors aren't there. Usually the 50s are quite bright and have like the colors really pop, and I feel instead of like a baby blue, they went for like a gray teal, and it totally matches, and so I really liked that aspect of it.
I like the production design a lot in this movie. I particularly, again, like it's funny how the way Graceland is portrayed, it's almost like we almost never see the connection between rooms. Like there's very few shots that like show a connection, and I think it's very interesting that like, I mean, it's just a simple filmmaking thing. The rooms are differentiated very well, such that even if you start on a shot that doesn't show the whole room, like you know exactly where you are. And like I think that's like true regardless of where you are in the house, so I think that's nice.
Yeah. Picking and choosing what I want to say for our last couple of points. I'll just say this because this is completely random, but I forgot to mention Kaylee Spaney did in fact win an award for this performance. She won the Volpe Cup for Best Actress at Venice, and I think that's worth mentioning. I should have mentioned that before, but I might have forgotten. I think that's deserved. I think she's
very good.
The star of this movie, and I think she does a very good job.
I think Jacob Elordi is very good in this movie too, actually.
I think he's good, yeah.
Very good. I haven't really seen him in much stuff because I haven't watched Euphoria and such.
No. I think maybe... Oh, do you have something?
I see that you have editing, and I also wanted to talk about that at some point.
Okay, I was actually going to skip it, but let's talk about it. What do you have to say?
I don't have too much to say. I just really like the way it chooses to hang on her in some situations and not show the rest of what's happening. I just think like the focus of the movie is really well tuned via the editing. Like it feels like we're seeing the right things at the right moments, and it's also, again, I just don't like when editing is doing too much. and I think this editing is doing what it needs to do.
I think it was pretty good for the most part. There were one or two moments though when it caught my attention, and for one or two moments, it's not like a pervasive issue, but I thought I would just mention it. There were at least two scenes where they decided to cut to wide, and I was like, oh, why'd you do that? And I think one was in a fight or something. It was just there were two moments where I was like, oh, that's strange, and I wish I'd written it down, but that's why I was gonna skip it. It just wasn't a fully formed thing. Last thing maybe I'll say is we didn't do favorite part. Whatever. Do you have a favorite part?
We're past that.
We're well past.
That point, yeah.
Okay. Sorry for favorite part fans.
Yeah.
But I guess to end it, I'll say the ending to me was curious. I couldn't tell we were at the end until it was like the end montage, and it was like, oh man, this is the end, isn't it? Like when she divorces him, I was like, oh, it's over. Oh, this is gonna be over in 2 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. Did you find that?
I felt there were different points in the movie where I didn't know when it was gonna end. I could just feel that we were nearing an end, but I was like, oh, okay, is it gonna end here? Is it gonna end here? But yeah, it wasn't quite until like she started to like separate herself from him where I was like, oh, okay, like we're in the beginning of the end here. And like this is all kind of winding down now. Like I get it now. And then I didn't know it was like for sure ending until then, but I do just like the abrupt nature of it. Like I get it's like the feeling that the feeling that like 14 years of her life just like and now she's moved on. Like that's so interesting to me. Like again, like that last shot made a very strong impression on me of her just like breathing for the first time in all this time. Like so I really liked how abrupt it was.
Maybe knowing when it ends on a rewatch that's just one of those things of like expectations of like just when you're reviewing something you haven't seen before, and it's hard to like just because you don't know what to expect sometimes. And so for this, I was definitely like, oh, it's over. I just felt, I don't know if unceremonious is the right word, because it did feel like it was kind of ceremonious in a way, but like just the feeling of like I didn't feel like a good like lead up into it. It really did take me by surprise, and I don't know what I would have done differently in Coppola's shoes, but yeah, I just noticed that it does really just like there's a switching point. I think it happens around when he leaves and she's holding the baby and she's not wearing the right hair. She's not wearing the black hair anymore.
Yeah.
That's from then on, it's like that's the end. And I don't think I realized that when that happened.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't until
I think there was for me before that point, I already thought this has got to end soon. And so when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, okay, we're getting there."
I actually made a point of not checking my watch. There were times I was like, I want to check my watch, but I won't. And so like I noted that was an issue, or again, maybe not an issue, but a symptom.
Sure.
And so yeah, it just took me by surprise. Anyways, final question: which is better, Elvis versus Priscilla?
Priscilla is much better. Priscilla is a much better movie.
I would have to agree. But we have a classic segment that also involves verses. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yes. So in case you haven't noticed, the podcast is called Predator versus Movies. We've done the movie part. Now it's time to get into the Predator. We asked the question, would this movie be better if the Predator from the movie Predator was in it? No. No, it wouldn't.
We already have enough Predators.
Yeah. Who would win, Predator or Elvis in this movie?
We've skipped this question for several weeks.
I know.
Forgetting it exists. Who would win? I think Elvis would try to serenade the Predator.
Yeah, if they were having a rock-off.
Sweet music. And if the Predator was underage. Yeah. I'm not making a joke. No, I think the Predator would kill Elvis. Good, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe good.
Maybe good.
Save Priscilla. Predator would save Priscilla from Elvis.
Yes.
Hooray.
Predator.
Different segment. Predator's picks. What have you been up to recently? What have you been seeing? Aidan, answer
I have not
question for us.
watched much this week, but I did watch The Killer because we almost had to do that for today's episode because I forgot that we were watching Priscilla instead, and I did go see The Killer and almost didn't have time to see Priscilla. So I did watch The Killer in theaters. I'll just say overall I liked it, but we're probably talking about that next week, so I won't go too much into it. Other movie I watched is one of the worst movies I've seen in a very long time, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's funny that Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, rather, the 2010 reboot, sorry.
You said you were going to watch that.
I wasn't going to watch it, but then I was with some friends and we were wanting to watch a horror movie that wasn't too crazy. And I was like, fine, like I'll watch these. Nightmare on Elm Street, this movie's really bad. It's funny, we're talking about predators. They really lean into the Freddy is a pedophile angle in this movie, which is not an overstated part of the original. It's not even explicitly said in the original. It's like you could infer that that's maybe he's like a child murderer and the parents all burn him alive, so it's like maybe something was going on. He's a creepy guy. They really it's a perfect example of this era of filmmaking that I forgot happened, where everything had to be so fucking edgy. And it's like, yeah, we're gonna do a Nightmare on Elm Street, but this time he wants to have sex with the kids, and he wants to kill them because
really?
he wants to kill them because he used to he was a pedophile and then he was burned alive and now he's still a pedophile to this day. And it's like, okay, man.
And he has knives on his hands.
Okay. Yeah, and he has knife hands. Yeah.
Is it knife hands
this
or
movie
needle
sucked.
hands?
He has knife hands. Although for a particular scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors, he does have needles on his hands too. So, but it's like a dream thing. Yeah, this movie's terrible. It's horribly directed. There's no tension in any scene. At no point does Freddy feel like a threatening character. Like when there are a bunch of chase scenes that are devoid of any feeling. This is a stupid movie. Don't watch it. This should be burned alive, much like Freddy Krueger himself.
Nice. Yeah, okay, I guess I'll do my pick. I also watched The Killer, not because I thought we were doing it, but because I wanted to, and I wanted to see it in theaters. That is half my fault, because I did say on the pod last week that we'd be doing it, but then I did change my mind.
Do you know what made me lock in that we were doing The Killer for some reason, despite having agreed to doing Priscilla? It was because we had a conversation where you were like, "Oh, have you seen The Killer in theaters yet?" And I think my mind just took that as, "Oh, I need to see that for the pod."
Right.
But that wasn't
fair.
Right. Yeah.
I can understand.
Was it not your fault? That is still my fault. Don't get me wrong. But that is why that happened.
No, I understand. Excited to talk about it next week, but I feel like we do have the same take on it. I feel like I talked to Peter just like asking if he wanted to be on that episode, and he does, so be excited for next week.
Peter's back!
Hopefully,
after like a
hopefully
month.
I'm not hyping up something that doesn't end up happening, so hopefully he does in fact come, but he even said like he heard the consensus was the same, and he's like, "This is what I heard. Is this what you felt?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually it is." But like, it's an enjoyable Fincher doing what Fincher used to do. Like he's kind of like back to his roots, a fucked up guy, and it seems sort of autobiographical, and I don't know. It's just like a fun Fincher. I don't think it's more than that, and I think that's kind of the succinct way of putting it. I watched after that Miss Congeniality. The Sandra Bullock, when did that come out? 2000 movie, where she is an FBI agent undercover at a beauty pageant.
Oh, that's the plot of that movie. I did not know that that's what... Oh, okay.
I wasn't paying a ton of attention, but like... not for me, maybe. I did pick up on a lot of like the like jokes. It is supposed to be kind of... I think ultimately its point is like women can be whatever they want, and it's kind of like it is pro women, but the jokes are obviously like anti-women jokes, you know, like it's like man, can you like imagine this girl loves donuts so much? She's like just loves donuts. That's so fucking weird. And I was over it. I don't know. It's a genre that like the it's sort of a rom-com, I think, or like I don't know. It was fine. It was a fine movie.
Sure.
Then I watched, like I said, the two Sofia Coppola movies in the past 2 or 3 days. So I watched Virgin Suicides, which I think is very good, very interesting in its perspective, like I had talked about. Hayden Christensen is in that movie.
Nice.
I couldn't figure this out from Letterboxd, but I think Giovanni Ribisi is the narrator. Who else? The guy from Oppenheimer, the one who built the collider, who had glasses and was kind of like mean to Oppenheimer sometimes. They're both.
You're not
from
talking about the
Berkeley.
Safdie, are you?
No, they're from Berkeley, from California. They were teaching together in California.
Oh, that fella. Okay, yeah.
Him as a young boy is in it. Sparman Girlfriend is in it. Some other. Anyways, I don't need to list the cast. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I watched also Marie Antoinette. Same movie as this movie, but obviously a lighter tone. More like girls just want to have fun kind of vibe to it.
Sure.
Those would be interesting to watch back to back, to be like
Sure.
one like very different takes on a very similar concept. I know that one gets some like really lame criticism of like the music is anachronistic and oh my god, I can't believe she put Converse in a shot. It's like Converse weren't even invented then, and it's like that's a feature, not a flaw. I think you're not. I think you've got this twisted. That's cool. That's a cool thing she did. I want to watch that one again because I think that one's like the shots are so good. There's some really like noteworthy ones in there. Rip Torn is in that, and he was just so funny. He's like the French king who's like just like a horny guy. He's got like what do you call it? Like someone who has an affair with. But like it's like a thing, like everyone knows. She's like his not consort, is like
The concubine?
His sort of. It's like his side piece. He's got his side piece, and everyone knows it.
Sure.
But yeah, I enjoyed that one. That was fun. And I think that's more or less it. I guess I'm still watching Better Call Saul. I watched the first episode of season 6 of Better Call Saul, so I'm finally in new territory because I had seen 1 through 5, and finally I'm catching up to stuff I hadn't seen. And yeah, it looks good. Good stuff. It is still good at that point. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I don't think I am. Yeah, so I have to remember what we do after this part.
we talk about what's next.
Next week we will probably do The Killer or The Marvels.
Nope. Nope.
I don't think we will do The Marvels on the pod. I think that is something we will just skip because there's so many good movies this month anyways.
Yeah.
And I barely have enough. Like I don't know if I'll even see it at all. But if you like our thoughts on movies, well, that's not the right order. If you like us, check us out on Instagram and Twitter at is it the same? Yeah, it's the same. Predator V Movies on both. If you like my thoughts on movies, check me out on Letterboxd at _Alex Gordon _ I leave reviews sometimes.
You can also check me out on Letterboxd. I'm 810sunny. That's 810SONNY. My name is Wombo. I also leave reviews sometimes.
Peter doesn't have anything to plug.
Peter has nothing to plug. Peter's not here, which means that you are contractually obligated to leave a 5-star review.
5-star review
on any platform that you listen to the podcast
on.
Or you need to do it now or die.
Or die. Or a comment. Or die.
Or comment.
Or
or die.
What's the other thing? Recommend to a friend or die.
Right.
You know, those are kind of your like 6 or 7 options.
Yeah. Or dying. You can also die.
That's another one. That's 8. Yeah. I think that's it. So
that is it.
Yeah. Until next week, I'm Alex.
I'm Peter. I'm Aidan.
And this is Predator versus Movies. See you later.
Woo,
Bye.